So, the Grim and the Grom's on its way, but you're way too impatient to wait a whole month just for a DLC. So, what's an enterprising player to do? Well, get them modded into the game, of course. So that's exactly what we're going to be taking a look at today. The Sons of Asuryan by Hounded and Williamson. So get comfy with a big old glass of milk, we'll jump straight into it.
Wow.
So, what does Sons of Asuryan do? Well, first and foremost, it makes Yvresse a playable faction led by the aforementioned Eltharion. I actually really loved their Vortex campaign experience for what it's worth. I'm excited to see what the DLC does, but this one was really fun all on its own. You get a lot of territory right out of the gates, but you're also immediately harassed by Sartosa. And because I've upgraded Sartosa with the mod Pirates of Sartosa, it makes them a pretty genuine threat to deal with. And due to your proximity to Norska, you also suffer a lot from chaotic corruption via osmosis. It also makes for a really strong economy, but one where you're constantly running around putting out fires. Eltharion himself also has two different end states. Full disclosure, I couldn't get to these, and I'll discuss why later. But they can effectively become Eltharion the Grim or Eltharion the Blind, depending on how you choose to go with them. And that's just the tip of the iceberg. The mod authors are looking into giving even unique campaign objectives as well. But that was before the DLC announcement, so we'll have to see if things get tempered in the time after. However, while Eltharion and Yvresse are the biggest changes to me, they're far from the only changes. So this mod adds in quite a few new units in the form of faction-specific troops. So Yvresse, for example, has, Yvresse troops being archers, spearmen, and swordmen variants that tend to act the same as their vanilla compatriots, but they start out with a bit of experience to show the life that Yvresse soldiers would have had. Meanwhile, Cove Warriors and Mistwalkers have been added in to provide a more elite infantry option, while Shore Riders become an alternative to Eltharion Reavers and Archers that are better in some ways, worse in other ways. It's kind of a fun one to have. There's also a ton of extra units for pretty much everyone to use though, including some generic additions shared by every single High Elf faction. More interesting to me was the noble lineup of heroes, then they've been completely expanded. You can now get nobles from Kras, Kothic, Nagaryth, Yvresse, and Eltharion, each as whom they act exactly as you would expect from their faction. Lastly, the gates around Ulthuan himself also get unique armies depending on where they are, with the troops being taken from the specific territories nearby. Kalidor also got a pretty extensive round of changes recently, so if you want to see what Imrek, the Free Sea Lord, would probably play like, again, here's your chance. Not going to be delving into that side of things in the video though, as this playthrough already took a ton of time and kind of went to hell in a handbasket. So as I said earlier, the campaign experience for Yvresse is actually pretty unique for the High Elves. In my other Elven campaigns, I usually only start out with a few territories, but I'm pretty easily able to expand and defend. But Yvresse starts out with this big chunk, but you don't really have any opportunity to grow anywhere, and defending it from probing attacks from your eastern and northern neighbors typically takes multiple lords. I had to use multiple lords just to keep myself from losing turf. Interesting, I actually found Ulthuan isn't as peaceful as it usually is, and actually trying to take it over via Confederation was substantially harder than normal. I think this goes into the fact that, I might be mistaken, but I believe the mod authors actually lowered the diplomatic bonuses that Yvresse gets, so it's quite a lot more difficult to go for a peaceful route. You are essentially a warmonger, and it shows up. Other unique things I also found too was, I said that it's hard to expand into Ulthuan, but it's also hard to expand pretty much everywhere. Anywhere you go from this is basically either chaotic corruption or undead corruption. So again, it becomes this huge tug of war between defending yourself long enough to survive and build up a big enough army to send over to attack. But you can't just rely on your main stack army to go do that, because the second you go over to attack Sartosa or Norska or Albion or whatever, you've essentially left your shores undefended, and now you're dead the second someone counterattacks you. Again, it was a pretty fun, unique campaign experience that I haven't really seen elsewhere. And again, I know I said it earlier, but I absolutely love the new nobles and how they're set up for each individual house. I think that was an incredibly fun decision to have made, and they all have their unique little slots for what they do and what they offer. but I did say I was having some hiccups, so let's get into compatibility and balance, and I guess we'll start with balance. It was pretty fair for the most part, though I will say there were some times where it was just blatantly obvious where one unit, for example, just completely and totally usurped another. For me, the Evresh troops, there was never ever a point in using the base troops when I had access to the Evresh ones, because they're just better to use. I'm just starting out with experience. It's not completely crippling the balance by any stretch of the imagination, and same thing goes with the legendary lords and everything else you'd get access to. It's pretty close to vanilla. It's not quite flawless, you know. But the other side of this, the compatibility, is where things absolutely went to hell in a handbasket. My game worked for all of, I would say, one evening, and then immediately became useless. Eltharion became a more generic lord. He lost all of his access to unique stuff. I started having issues with Imric as well after I confederated. A lot of this stuff, it's not just this mod's fault. I find in general a lot of the high elf mods have huge compatibility issues, and it's almost unique to the high elves, and it's one of the reasons I typically avoid doing high elf runs. I would love to see if it could maybe get sorted out later, or if we could find out what the issue is. I have heard that perhaps it was just an absolute script overload, but it's odd to me that I can run something like Pirates of Sartosa without hitting a script overload, which changes, I would say, even more lords and units and everything else than this, and yet this one apparently had issues with script overload. Like I said, I think to me it's probably more likely that it's just not playing nice with something else, and to completely go through every single thing with a fine-tooth comb, yeah, it's outside the scope of any one of these videos. It'd take a good week just to do that on its own. So then, conclusion time. Should you download Sons of Asuryan and keep it in your load order? Definitely download it. If you're using Kadrin's mod manager, and you absolutely should be using Kadrin's mod manager, I would probably recommend turfing the majority of your mods and doing a specific Sons of Asuryan profile and running it that way. Again, it's not the kind of thing I'm going to say to leave in your load order 24/7, just because, like I said, it does fight with stuff, and I'm only seeing it from this mod's run through, but I'm not sure if this would cause issues with trying to run other modded content, say for example from Mixu's Legendary Lords, or from Old vs. New, or something else. That is going to wrap it up for this particular video. As always, I want to thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all next time.